and thanks for coming. I think it's all important that you guys come along, because it has been a real tough few years for our rivers. Droughts, drying channels, dying rivers, algal blooms, thirsty towns, failing crops, massive catastrophic fish kills. When we're faced with that, it can be easy to feel overwhelmed, bloody angry, disconnected, powerless. I know when I turn on the radio in the morning, love Frano in the morning, when I turn it on, or when I flick through Facebook, I'm confronted with this sort of stuff. Accusations of mismanagement, vested interests, calls for royal commissions. It can get extremely, extremely depressing. But I want you guys just to sort of park that for a little minute, because I know many of you are probably feeling that. It's totally understandable. I know I feel it. I feel it often. But imagine, just for a second, where you want your rivers to get back to. So, your happy place. Have a think about it now. That's right. And your place may look like that. It may look very different from that. It may look different from the person sitting next to you. But I guarantee you one thing, whether that person next to you is a recreational fisher or a water user, they may be a government employee like me, they may be a public school teacher or publican, I guarantee you that we all want the same thing. And that's healthy, sustainable rivers, flourishing native fish populations, productive fisheries, prosperous regional economies, and happy and healthy communities. It's our shared vision, I bet you. And it's why more than ever we're seeing organisations like Ozfish and engaged recreational anglers involved in habitat rehabilitation. It's why we're seeing logs and other habitat get put into rivers. It's why we're seeing more and more of those fishways constructed to help fish migrate up and down rivers. It's why we're improving the design of regulators and weirs so that we can safely move fish downstream. And it's why we're engineering those flows to help stimulate fish spawning and improve recruitment. And it's why we're seeing more and more water users modernise their businesses so that they can produce more with much less water. Let's not forget, many of those water users are also really keen fishermen, and a lot of them are also habitat heroes. Despite all that good work, we still have one huge blind spot, and that is that too many of our fish are ending up here. So every year we lose millions of native fish from our waterways. They're sucked into pumps and they're diverted down channels. In fact, so many of the fish end up here that from time to time we have discussions about using these channels as hatcheries to restock our rivers. I kid you not. That very discussion was being had here on the Bidgie down in Leeton back in the 1940s between rec anglers, water users and the head of New South Wales Fisheries. If you want to know more about it, you can read about it in the archives of the Murrumbidgee Irrigator. We've heard a little bit about those numbers. So a study on a pump in the Namoi they found 240 fish a day being removed at a pump. We heard about that one up in the Condamine, 12,000 fish in a 9-hour period. Astonishing. Gravity-fed diversions. There was a study done down on the Murray that looked at 5 diversions between Yarrawonga and Barham, and the water removed over a 3-month period. So looking at egg and larvae, Murray cod, silver perch and golden perch that drift downstream, the fish losses equated to what we estimate to be about 1.2 million fingerlings at that 5 diversions in 3 months. To put that in perspective, in that year, that equated to about 61% of the total stocking efforts across New South Wales. All right, so we just heard about how We're engineering environmental flows to stimulate these fish so that they can spawn and then their larvae drift downstream at the same time as the taps get turned on. That's what's happening at 1 or 2 sites. You know, there's a lot of diversions across the basin, so it's not hard to see that these numbers can quickly become astronomical. But let's not forget, this is not a good outcome for water users either. Okay, we heard that many of them love their fish. We also know that with these fish come sticks, stones, duckweed, rubbish. That rubbish chokes pumps, it clogs filters and siphons and blocks sprinklers. I've spoken to guys that tell me about how many times a day they have to backflush their filters to keep them clean so they can keep the water flowing. I've spoken to guys that actually pay employees to go around and unpick sprinkler heads by hand because they get clogged with rubbish. And I've spoken to guys that tell me that when they get sprinklers are getting blocked, they get uneven distribution of water across their crops and they get varying yields. So it's a real headache for these guys. And because of that, you know, many of our diversions are screened. The screens look like this or this, and believe it or not, they also look like that. And quite frankly, those sort of screens, they just don't cut the mustard from a fish protection and a debris control perspective. The mesh is just too coarse. Right? It's like putting chicken wire on your window and hoping to keep the mozzies out. It's just not going to work. The velocities are way too high, so you're getting fish and rubbish sucked into the intake or sucked against the mesh so it can't escape. But I want you guys, if you walk away just with one new piece of knowledge tonight, I want you to walk away with the fact that there is a better solution. It's available now, you can get it in Australia. It's been available for years. You know, it's been developed for over 100 years in places like the United States. And that's better designed, effective diversion screens that protect fish and keep debris out of intakes. And this is what they look like. You can design them for gravity-fed diversions, you can design them for pumps. And their design will vary depending on the context. But they have a number of key features. And firstly, that's that they have much finer mesh. So we can build these things with mesh down to 2-3 mils. Right? And because the mesh is so fine, what it does is it actually keeps the fish and the rubbish away from the intake where the velocities are high. Matt mentioned earlier that he'll cast a lure near the foot valve of a pump because it's structure, and we know fish like structure. A fish approaches this, it's gone. It approaches this, it's kept further away. Because they've got large surface area, much larger surface area than that hole there, it spreads that velocity out over a much larger distance. So effectively what you've got is less suction at any one point across that screen. And that's a critical point, because what that does is it reduces the velocity that the fish and the rubbish is exposed to without reducing the volume. So it's less velocity, not less water. So the better designs also employ self-cleaning mechanisms. So here you can see a brush, but it might be a water jet, might be an airburst system. And purely, if you will reduce impingement of rubbish if you can keep those velocities down, but the brushes and the air jets and the water jets make sure you keep that entire surface area screen free so you can maintain those low velocities. And these can be scaled to any size pump. The bigger the surface area, the lower the velocity. This is such good logical, it makes sense. You even ask, why aren't we doing this now? It makes such good sense that these are going in now. Let's not be mistaken. People are putting these in now. This is Curly Bryan on the Lachlan. We put one in a month ago. I spoke to him this morning. He's loving it. Okay, so he was one of the guys that was spending hours a day picking stuff out of his sprinklers. Not a problem anymore. He also takes water out of a a public accessible water piece of the Lachlan River where it's a keen, good fishing spot for recreational anglers. So it's win-win. We're seeing these benefits now, all right? But we don't want to just see them at 1, 2, 3 sites. Don't want to just see them at 20 sites. You saw how many diversions are up there. We need this to go large, okay? We want to see this across the basin. And that's what the Screens for Streams initiative is all about. It's largely funded by the Recreational Fishing Trust, with funding also from the Ian Potter Foundation and the New South Wales Government. And it's about researchers working with industry to make sure that they're building the best screens that they can for fish protection. It's researchers working with these water users to make sure we fully understand their screening needs. And it's about shining the light on the Curly Bryants, these early adopters, these screening legends, because no one sells a screen quite like a farmer with a screen. And it's about taking this best practice and putting it in the hands of as many water users and as many people as we can. So what are we doing? So when these screening projects are going in, we're showcasing them, okay? We're promoting them, and that's happening now. We've got screens going in the river. We've just completed experimental testing with real fish in front of screens so we can provide engineers with the design criteria to ensure that our native fish are protected. And guidelines, we'll be producing guidelines about August. We're kickstarting an awareness campaign. Talks like this, but central to it will be a website, screensforstreams.com, which will be the one-stop shop to go to find out everything about screens. And we've set up a fish screening technical advisory group to help coordinate and standardise efforts across the different states, because we want everyone pushing together in the same way and applying best practice across the basin. So we have membership from water users, researchers, recreational fishers, engineers, fisheries managers, all sitting at the table to make sure this is a complete success. And we're going to measure our success, because we will be successful. So we're going to measure, and we're measuring current perceptions and awareness, and we're going to monitor that through time as well as uptake. So that's what we're doing. What do we need you guys to do? If you're a water user, you need to get on board. You need to upgrade your intake. Get it in the water, get it on your pump, get it on your diversion, start enjoying the benefits. If you're a manager, it might be a river manager, fisheries manager, maybe an ag manager. All right, we need you to help facilitate the uptake. Find where you can find some funding to support this. Write it into your management plans. Write it into your investment plans. The native fish strategy we'll hear about next is up there for public consultation. Make sure screening programs are incorporated into that. Irrigation modernisation schemes. It's not all about lining channels. Make sure we're putting screens on the intakes as well. If you're anglers, you guys are pioneering this. You're already driving it. I mentioned the Rec Fishing Trust is pushing behind this. Keep it up. You guys know the river. You've got the relationships with the water users in the area. Identify projects. Help see them realised. Get involved with Ozfish to get these projects realised and help celebrate the success. All right, just spread the word about it. As I finish, I want you to take yourself back to that shared value that we have for rivers, where you want us to get back to. All right, sustainable, healthy rivers, flourishing native fish populations, productive fisheries, prosperous rural economies, and happy and healthy communities. Don't be mistaken, we can get back there, okay? But it'll require irrigation, diversion, screening, effective screening to be a critical piece of that puzzle. If we don't do it, we're not going to get the most out of all those other rehabilitation activities. All right, it's underutilised and there's a huge opportunity. It's about keeping the water flowing whilst keeping fish in the river. But really it's about this shared value. All right, It's about healthier rivers, it's about more money in rural communities, and it's about better fishing for us and for future generations. Thanks.